now found that archaeologically, but buried in the Bible is this obscure text. Let me read it to you. From the Song of Deborah, in the book of Judges, it's buried the following text. And Dan, why did he remain with ships? There were no ships amongst the Canaanites. They were inland. There were no ships amongst Hebrew tribes and refugees escaping Egypt. There were no tribes from people with Abraham moving over from what we now call Iraq. These are sea peoples who voted to join this conglomerate that ultimately will make up Israel, the root word meaning El. Okay, having moved right along. You can't believe then the stories about Dan. Good morning, Kathy Philippin, our resident Armenian Orthodox, along with John's wife, Orthodox. We've got everybody here. Orthodox to the great Orthodox churches of the East. You can't believe the stories about Dan. It turns out the Bible was wrong. The stories about the great invasions of Canaan never took place. You have this story about Joshua destroying the town of Ai. We now know Ai was not a noun, capital A-I. Are you ready? This was an adjective that meant heap of ruins. So according to later writers, Joshua destroyed a heap of ruins. Lovely. Then you find out, are you ready for this? You read about these priests going around Jericho 7 times, blowing trumpets out of tune. The music was so bad the town collapsed. Nope, not true. You've all heard of Troy. Yes?
Yes.
Why were so many, Troy is on a fault line that goes all the way down to Jericho. And when that fault line erupts, Troy is destroyed, not by Greek Trojan horses. No, it's destroyed by a famous fault line that destroyed Troy 23 times and also destroyed Jericho several times. And how do we know this? By archaeology. I didn't know this, but when you have an earthquake, things collapse a certain way. And when they collapse that way, you know how the town was destroyed. Roy Martin brings in a group of enraged, drugged out Sufis. They attack. When you attack something, buildings burn and they collapse one way. When they are attacked by an earthquake, they collapse another way. It's archaeology 101. Who knew? I didn't. So what you're going to have is you're going to find that all these stories are interesting stories, but they're told hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later. Key point. So if you can't trust stories about Dan that are in the Bible, except for these, if you can't trust stories about this great invasions, and then you take a look at Ezra coming in and bullying people who already live there, comes in from Babylon, comes in high, mighty, puffed up, smelling like a Babylonian, dressed like a Babylonian, perfumed like a Babylonian, coming in to tell the locals how they should live when they have survived under terrible conditions. And he comes in, thank you very much, very well fed, very well dressed, and bullying everybody. If this doesn't work for you, there's good reasons. Now, how do you interpret? It turns out there are editorial groups, and we need to discuss that before we begin. I said to you a thing called the documentary hypothesis. Now, Karen Armstrong is not up to date in one sense. Karen Armstrong reflects what I was taught long, long ago, far, far away. Now, some of you know I went to seminary. I went to Union Theological Seminary, which is affiliated with Columbia. And I got there about the time dirt appeared upon the planet. And don't shake your head, Ron. What is the rudeness here? Rude. Okay, I graduated, you ready for this? Over 50 years ago. That's a scary thought when you realize you graduated from theological school over half a century ago. At the time, the prevailing thought, as Karen Armstrong said, we were divided into 4 editorial groups. J, for those, the Germans gave this, J for those who pronounce God Yah. Yahweh. So you gave it a J. E for Elohim, the root word being El. Who was the head god of the Canaanites? El. So did you ever notice how many times you see the root word El in the Hebrew Bible? El Shaddai, Elohim, El everywhere. By the way, his son was the storm god Baal. Did you ever see how many times you see in the Hebrew Bible the word Baal? What fascinated me, by the way, is Hasidic Judaism. They have all these names, El and Baal, all over the place, and they're named after the storm god of El, his son. I never understood that in Hasidic Judaism. Moving along. So you got J and E, then you got D, and this was a group who were absolutely convinced that laws were given directly to Moses, and those are enshrined by the teaching of the priesthood in Jerusalem. It's called D under the Deuteronomic reform under Josiah. And finally, during the Great Exile, there was a complete concern, how do we keep alive the teachings, and here you go, the rituals. The rituals. So you're going to find then a re-editing of all the laws and put it into, if you might say, a corpus. The priests are going to be concerned about keeping rituals. And if you ever read the book of Exodus, let me help you with this, you're going to get some very, very strange things. You're going to read in the book of Exodus where you've got a ragtag mixed lot. Everybody forgets that. A mixed lot, Hebrews and non-Hebrews, went into the Exodus. You're going to be told that the priest in the desert had to wear, and these garments are described. There's only one problem. There is nowhere a group of refugees in the desert are going to have that kind of material, that kind of thread, and that kind of stuff to make that. Am I making clear? There is an ephod and all these things you have to wear that tells you what you're supposed to wear. And I'm thinking, yes. And where the hell do you think you're going to get the material to do that when you're a bunch of refugees hiding and running for your life in the desert? Where are you going to get the thread? Excuse me. I'm saying to Roy and Ron and Ray, wait, guys, before we leave already, grab some thread. I need some gold thread already. I need some special needles. And those three guys are going to say to me, you can imagine the words they're going to use. We don't have time. We're running for our lives. What's wrong with you? Keep your thread and needles and they'll tell me what I can do with it. Who's going to get threads and needles of special gold? We're peasants, by the way, in Egypt, going to have access to gold thread that you're going to make the ephod and all the rest of that stuff with, which is told what you're supposed to do in Exodus. The other great thing, by the way, to show you how you have to be careful about editorials, you've all heard the story of Moses coming down the mountain and the golden calf. Did you not? Does somebody here want to tell me the story? Ron, do you remember the story of the golden calf?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Ron is going to tell us the story you all know, then I'm going to tell you what really happened. Go ahead.
In outline, Moses went up to the mountain and had an encounter with God, who gave him the 10 commandments to share with the people, okay? And he came down the mountain to find that the people had departed from their usual ways of worship and they had created and started to worship a golden calf. Well, he lost it and started to remonstrate with them. And that's basically it.
And tell us how they got the golden calf.
We don't know.
No, it tells us. No, it tells us. Anybody remember? Tells us how they got the golden calf. Anybody remember? Nanette, do you remember?
They melted their jewelry, I think.
Yes, they melted the jewelry. All right. All right.
Yeah.
Now, are you ready for this? Are you ready? First of all, to melt gold, you're going to need a crucible. Now, we're placing the story of Moses in the Exodus roughly about 1200 BCE, which is the time of the great building of Ramesses II. That's one thing just about everybody agrees upon, all right, about 1200 BCE. Crucibles, by the way, were big. So are we here? Everybody here, we're following me now. We're all running for our lives. We're going to get out. We're getting out while we can. And Kenneth says to Ron and Roy, dudes, I need you to bring me a crucible. Whereupon, laughing himself silly, Ray Roldan says, and how are we going to get a giant crucible out? What are we going to put it on? How are we going to move it? These things are big. How are you going to move a big crucible in the desert? Hello, how are you going to do that? Move it. You're a bunch of peasants. Where are you going to have access to a roller? Where are you going to have access to a crucible? Where are you going to have access to horses or anything else to move the thing? And if you have horses, how are you going to feed them in the desert? Am I making sense to anybody? Number two. All right. I'm getting there, Ron. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Somebody needs to pull his beard. That's what they used to do in the old days. They used to pull your beard. All right. Next, you have to melt the gold. Thank you to Ron, who just pointed up there. Put it up again, Ron. How much heat you have? To melt gold. Oh, you would have to put it in centigrade. See, this is the problem with people living in another world.
Celsius.
Yes, yes. Could you put it in Fahrenheit?
I'll put it in Fahrenheit for you. Give me a second.
I'm going to get hives from this class. This class is going to cause me hives. It's going to cause me hives.
And this is going on while there's the whole push to go back to the imperial measurement system.
Yes, yes, yes. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
We'll get it in Kelvin next.
I hear a lot of pounding there. 1,947 degrees Fahrenheit. Where, duckies, are you going to get that kind of heat in the desert? There is nothing. There never has been, and there's nothing now that you can burn to cause that much heat to melt gold. So let's start. How are we going to get a crucible? Duh. How are you going to move it, that huge thing, along in the desert? Duh. How are you going to find anything that you can light that's going to melt the gold? Now, wait a minute, we're not done yet. As we're leaving, I say to Pat Busbus, yoo-hoo, Patsy girl, can you bring a mold? And she says, what kind of mold? The kind we're going to pour gold into. And she's going to say to me, are you out of your mind? Where are we going to be? We're running for our lives. Where do you expect me to find a mold? For what, by the way, it's supposed to look like? Oh, a calf. What? You want me to find a mold for a calf? Are you out of your mind? We're running. Where am I going to find one? Where they're not bringing a crucible. Do you see how size that is? Where are we going to gold? You got to be kidding. So you see, we have some impossibilities here. How do you get a crucible and move it? The gold, don't believe a bunch of peasants screaming for your jewelry are going to get the jewelry. Don't believe that for a minute. Where are you going to get anything to melt it? And finally, where are you going to get a mold into which to pour the gold to make a golden calf? One of my students said, I'm not joking, said, well, Dr. Claus, do you think they could, like, scoop something out in the ground? I said, are you suggesting with their hands, they scoop out something that looks like a calf in the sand? And into that pour molten gold, melted gold. The class roared, absolutely roared. And the student said, that's not very smart, is it? I said, honestly, smart doesn't come close. Now, here's what we find to make matters worse. Calves were never worshipped. We have found golden calves archaeologically. And guess what the calf was used for? The calves on their back had striations, and it was understood they were symbolic for Yahweh standing there to look over creation. It was understood that when Israel and Judah broke apart, little Judah being a little runt and being very, very angry about it all, Israel being very big, 10 tribes, took a golden calf at the southern border and a golden calf at the northern border with the idea that this was symbolic of Yahweh himself looking over the boundaries and protecting the mighty kingdom of Israel, while you down there in Judah, which was all olives and sand, had that little town of Jerusalem, which was not as big as you all thought, by the way. During the time of David, that magnificent town of Jerusalem was all of 5 acres on the side of a mountain. I bet you didn't know that either. Maybe had 4,000 to 5,000 people in it. The things they never told you when you were in Sunday school or Hebrew school. So once you get all of this, it's important to take a look at what we think are editorial groups, so you have an idea of who has a point of view. Okay, number one, most scholars still agree there was a group that was absolutely insistent there were a set of laws that must be followed. And it must be anchored in Jerusalem. Obviously, this group was from Little Judah, and these were called Deuteronomists from the book of Deuteronomy, which is most of it is a whole book. There are parts of it that aren't, but most of it. And they have a particular point of view. If you don't agree with their point of view, it's understood it's their way or the highway, one of those groups. Competing with them is a group of priests who are absolutely insistent that there's only things that God will accept. There are things that God will not accept. And so they have a whole series of rituals, a series of ways that priests will dress, a series of who makes up the priesthood. And so they also will come up with a list of, over a period of time, of refinements. And in their mind, they're going to actually believe that if they ever get back to Jerusalem, they will rebuild the temple, and all of these will be reenacted. So in Babylon, you have then 2 very strong groups, but that's not all you have. You have others who remain holding on to and keeping other tribal records and other tribal remembrances that they know have historical value. So ultimately, then you're going to have a series of editors, probably, as the dating now goes, somewhere between 530 or 40, all the way down to about 300, in which you're going to have editors from the D group and editors from the P group trying to this, and then there'll be other editors that say, that's not all, folks, that's not all. And then you get the annoying passages that they wish they could eliminate, but the final editor has a say that really annoys both D and P. Editorials that keep in the fact that when they do a census of the land of Canaan, the Canaanites are alive and well. If you ever read the book of Judges and read chapters 2 and 3, you're going to see that most of Canaan is loaded with Canaanites. When you start reading about the tribe of Dan, why do you still have ships? You still are in ships. And you're going to find the story of David and Bathsheba, which, by the way, they tried to write out and could not. And you're going to find other embarrassing stories of very famous people. And you're going to find the story of Abraham has knots in it and warts. Abraham can't have a son, so he has a woman named Hagar, the first substitute. Well, what's the word I wanted for? A surrogate. The first surrogate we hear about is in the Bible, is in the very beginning, when he has an Egyptian woman have a son. And how does he treat that son and that woman later on? He tosses them out in the desert to die. Very, very bad stories. So you're going to find that D and P hoped that those stories would go away, but people kept them on. And they refused that they do not go away. So the Hebrew Bible then is a very fascinating collection of a group that demanded laws be kept, rituals be kept, but they did not have the whole say. Other pieces were kept, other stories were kept, and the final editors insisted they do not be edited out. So approaching that then, you're going to get, when we study, the way we study this, is somebody who is not confined to dogma or dogma, somebody who does not believe in the sin of omission. Yeah, like the Song of Songs. Thank you, Maureen. The Song of Songs and Ecclesiastes and Job were very fascinating annoyances. To this day, nobody knows how those three made it in the final canon. I would call it divine inspiration or guilt, one or the other, when the final editor said, we really need to keep these in because they're a counterpoint. By the way, I want you to know, and I think I know you'll appreciate this. My classes have lots of students of color and Muslims. And my students of color, by the way, are often reminded there is a major difference between African-American, Jamaican, and Haitian. They forget that. There's a difference between African-American and islanders, very big differences. And between islanders, there's differences. And so we've learned that there's African-American, but there's Jamaican, Haitian, and Trinidad, which is either Indian of color or African of color. So my students get a whole learning about all of this. And each of those bring a way of talking and referring to things. And so I'm saying to you that this is the way we look at the Bible. We bring all of these, because all of these different traditions are in there. And somehow the final edit. Now, my black students, my students of color, by the way, had never read the beginning of the Song of Solomon, where it says, I am black, I am beautiful. My students never saw that and they were dumbfounded. And also, did anybody remember the story that nobody wanted you to read about Moses' second wife? Did anybody remember that? Nobody ever remembers. You've heard about his first wife.
It was Midian, she was black.
Yes, yes, Roy remembers. The first wife was the daughter of Ruel or Jethro, the high priest of Midian, whose God was, are you ready for this? Yah. Now you want to know where Yahweh came from? Yes. He sends her away, and we never told what happened to his two sons. That's interesting. They're given names, but they disappear. The next thing you know, Moses is married to a woman, and for those of you who want to find this out, the book of Numbers, which nobody ever reads amongst our crowd, it's buried in the first 5 books, chapter 12, verse 1. Miriam and Aaron are very angry with Moses, for he married a Cushite woman, parentheses, for a Cushite woman he married. And nobody knows what that means. They never look up. Cush is Ethiopia. Ethiopia means black. Hello. Or as one of my black students said, it's not black, it's brown. One of the greatest homilies I ever heard was at FIU when one of my students came in with a black folder and he said, I want you to listen up. Listen up. What color is this? This is black. Do I look like that? Look at this. Look at this. Stop calling me black. It's brown. This is brown. That's black. It was one of the most magnificent, on the spur of the moment homilies I ever heard. People got to learn about differences of shades of color, which at that point, somebody who was Hispanic got up and said, I'm olive skinned. Look how dark I am. And somebody said, Claus, how would you describe your color? I said, morgue white. Do you like that, everybody? Morgue white. Isn't that a lovely? Yes. So I said, yes. All right. Yes. And they didn't give Moses' Cushite woman's name, did they? Yes. The editors nightly aced that one out too. So having said all that, let's take a look then. Let's begin by pulling up. Now we got this out of the way. We start now. And I'm glad you have great patience. I will now share the screen. Wait, I have to share the screen. Pardon me. Hold on. Can you all see this now? Can you all see this? Okay. Now, I want you to look at, this is chapter 2, and look how chapter 2 ends. These are the generations of the heaven and the earth when they were created. See, this is chapter 2. You ready? Everybody sees that. Now, here you go. This is now part of chapter 4. How did you get the creation story ending number 1, the first creation story ending at the beginning of chapter 4, and then it continues in chapter 4? How did that get divided? Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, everybody. The Bible was not started with chapters and verses. People take this for granted, and I don't know why. Now, one of the nice things you know about Judaism is you will see when the scrolls are open, they're scrolls, and they're columns, and you go from right to left. Is that right? Yeah, right to left. And there's scrolls. There are no chapters and verses. We get that. Why does everybody not get this? That would be in the New Testament as well. Think about when you send an email. Does anybody here email? All right, when you email, do you put 1? This is going to be your first paragraph. Do you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with each sentence? No, nobody does that, do they? Nobody does that. Where did the chapters and verses come from? And please don't tell me from God. Well, you can if you wish. If you wish to do that. We'll go back to sharing screen. Did any of you hear Stephen Langdon? No. Why should you? There's no reason why you should have. Stephen, oh, you're going to love this. Wait a minute. Where is he? Ron, smile. Stephen Langdon was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Excuse me. 1200s. They're new. Chapters and verses are relatively new to the Old Testament Hebrew Bible and the New Testament writings. Think of all the writings in the New Testament. Most of them are letters. A lot of those letters, nobody had chapters and verses. Stephen Langdon in the 1200s, Archbishop of Canterbury, was the first one to add chapters and verses. And that's why you're going to see weird things. You're going to see the creation story should just end. And you start chapter 2. But for some reason, Langdon continued it. So the second story, which is really the first, begins at chapter 2, 4b. That makes no sense. So when you find things in the Bible and you see definitions like chapter, it doesn't make sense. You're right. Chapters and verses are artificial. Are we clear about that? They are artificial. This is not ordained by, I don't know, whatever. Okay, we'll go back to the share screen and we'll look at the, all right. In the day that the Lord God made earth and the heavens. Now, the word Yahweh, has an interesting history. And it is not from the land of Canaan. The northwest region of the Arabian Peninsula is mountainous. It's called the land of Midian. And Midian comes up regularly because of the trading that the Midianites did. Those of you might remember that Joseph in the coat of his many colors, Joseph was sold by his brothers to Midianite traders. You'll hear that word all the time, Midianites. And you'll also hear part of one of their clans is called the Kenites. A variation of Kenite, everybody, is Cain and Cainite. Think of the word Cain, the name Cain. Foreshadowing, everybody, foreshadowing. So Yah is the God of the northwest region of the Midianites. And who did Moses marry? The high priest's daughter, and the high priest of who? The Midianites. And what was their God in the word? Yah, the God Yah. That embarrassingly tried to get buried, but it too has been unearthed. Moving right along. Made the earth and the heavens. when no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no vegetation of the field had yet sprung up. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no one to till the ground, but a stream. Think of a great watering system. You all thought that sprinklers were new. No, sprinklers started in the first story of creation. Now let's remind everybody before we go any further, the first stories in everything we've got are all oral. Does everybody remember that now? Things were said orally. Stories were told. This is originally a story. There's tremendous debate about the dating of when this was written down, but the guesstimates are roughly around the time of David. Somebody decided to finally write down this story. This is not the same as chapter 1. We'll get to that in a while. But notice how very simple this is. Very easy. There was no plant. There was no this. But a stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. You get a stream pop up and whoosh. So the first sprinkling system. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground. Many of you have heard funeral services. From dust you came, and to dust you shall return. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Have any of you ever heard that at a funeral service? This is where it comes from. This is where it comes from, the idea from dust you came, into dust you shall return. Notice how very simple this is. You don't need a degree in philosophy, theology, dogmatics, or dogma to read it. It's a story that's meant to be told around campfires to explain very simply so anybody can listen to it. Now, by the way, one of the things that I have always done from the very beginning is I have omitted academic and theological language from my discourse. When I speak in class, I use language that everybody uses. And I remember one time in the very first big congregation I had, somebody came up to me who was an incredibly well-read, had high school education, but really was brilliantly read. He said, I want to tell you something. My wife comes to church with me, and she said, you are the only person she's ever understood from the pulpit. And she said, she knows you're not speaking down to her, but you use a language that she understands. And she said, I find it interesting. The college educated people complain about the same thing. They said they understand you too for a change. There's something about using language that we all understand that is not speaking down. It's how you can understand each other better. We always misinterpret things, but it's, you know what I'm saying? If I spoke to you in very theological language and used very, very dogmatic language, I'd lose everybody. I'd also probably die of boredom. All right, moving along. These are stories meant to be told. So you can see you're sitting around and the shaman and the healer would be telling these stories. And then the Lord God breathed from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. The Hebrew word is ruha. And that's the kind of the idea that God is breathing godness into the ground, which means that we go back to the first people to write this down. Does anybody know who the first group to talk about there is a spark of the divine within them? Does anybody know the first religion to actually write this down? Anybody?
The Hindus?
Yes, the Hindus. Absolutely. They were the first ones way, way back. They talked about it about 4000 BCE, about 2000 BC, 4,000 years ago. 500 years later in the Vedas, they will write down the idea that we are surrounded by divine reality, and some of that is within us. In the very depths of what we are is the Atman, and around us is divine reality, the Brahman, and our journey is to unite the two. So they're the first ones to wrestle around the fact, is there something divine within us? This argues that when God breathed into this simple inanimate ground, we become animate, and that implies there was within us also some of divine reality as well. There was some essence, some ruah, some within ourselves. And man became a living being. And the Lord God planted a garden in the east. Notice the always in the east. Have you ever noticed that? Always in the east. The mystical east.
Yeah, and that holds true also for a lot of indigenous cultural.
Yes. Absolutely. The idea there's something here. All right. And there he put man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. By the way, that can be translated as, instead of good and evil, put down this better: knowledge of all things. Another way of translating that is knowledge of all things. I don't know which is scarier, knowledge of all things or knowledge of good and evil. I don't know which is scarier. Think about that. Think about this for a minute. Let me just stop this for a minute right here, because I see the time, but I want to stop for a minute. I'm curious here. If all of you had a chance to have knowledge of all things, would you want that? Maureen would. I'm trying to think if Maureen, now Pat, I'm going to put you on the spot. Not only are you sitting right next to her, she's your sister and you have to live there. Would you like I can't do this. I'm not going to ask you if you'd like her to have knowledge of all things. I wouldn't ask you to answer that. You can if you wish.
I plead the fifth.
Lovely answer. That's how you live, people. That's how you live. That's how you live. That's how you. Danny Sorkin says, I try it and probably regret it later. Oops, too late. All right, AJ, would you like the knowledge of all things? You have to unmute. Guys, you have to unmute. You have to unmute. Would you like the knowledge of all things?
I think I have so many things going on right now that I wouldn't want the knowledge of all things. I'd want to just maybe limit it to pickleball strategy, stuff like that. You asked me.
Did she just say pickleball?
Yeah.
It's a thing.
I know what pickleball is.
Okay.
AJ has only fallen on her back several times. So by playing pickleball and blah, blah. We'll get pickle. All right. Pickleball. All right. My cousin, Pat. My cousin list is growing. It includes AJ and Ron too. This is very annoying. It's growing. All right. Pat, would you like the knowledge of all things?
I don't think my human brain could handle it. Or maybe my human psyche, more to the point.
All right. Nanette, what about you?
At this point, no. Maybe when I was younger, I would have said yes. But now I think there's such a thing as the blessing of not knowing all.
That's a good sermon. Send that to me.
Well,
as an email.
well said.
That's a good title for a share, right? Send that to me as an email, would you?
Okay.
I'm serious. All right, John, what about you? Would you like the knowledge of all things?
I already have that. And let me say this. Absolutely not.
This group is killing me. I swear.
I'm a human and I'm a male human. So there is no hope of ever having that, first of all. But I think it would definitely, I agree with Pat, it would be way too much for my brain. I would not be able to discern or come to conclusions about anything. It would be too much.
You know, I'm going to be asked by my cardiologist how I'm staying alive. I said, you've never met my Saturday morning group. If this can't keep you alive, nothing will. All right, Holly, pickleball. All right, Holly, would you like the knowledge of all things?
Ignorance is bliss.
Moving right. All right. These are with you. I'm all right. What about you, Ron? Now, before you
that's
answer,
something-
remember who your prime minister is.
Yeah, I know. There's some things that I think I wouldn't want to know. They would be too disturbing. And I think, as Pat said, I don't think my psyche could deal with it. So
Okay,
no.
I want you to write me that in an email, just that answer. Holly, I want you to write your answer, and I'm going to have to put the three of yours together because I'm going to use that for a share later on. I'm going to clip them together. Roy, what about you? Would you want the knowledge of all things?
At the surface, it would seem hurtful. Like I wouldn't want to know people's opinions about me or about, I think if I had the knowledge that went deep enough to understand the needs of the heart underneath those opinions, underneath those judgments, then it would be okay. But because I think our judgments are sort of defenses against what we're afraid of. But I think just knowing everybody's opinion about me or about people I cared about or about things I cared about would be hard.
It's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought about that. Franzella, would you like the knowledge of all things?
Only if it comes, hold on, only if it comes with the knowledge and power to do something about it. But if it doesn't, then no.
All
If it
right.
doesn't come with the power to actually help and do something with it, then no.
That's an interesting, send me that too. Roy, send me yours. All you guys who did is send me this. I'm going to put this in a package. Ray, what about you? Would you like the knowledge of all things?
Absolutely, without hesitation.
All right, we got two, Maureen and Roy, and John said he already had it. Okay, we're moving right on. Don't forget pickleball. All right, Danny said he might like that, but regret it later on. Kay Schweitzer, Kay and Don, would you like the knowledge of all things?
As long as it's in very small, simplified Cliff Notes.
I love that. Yes, very small, simplified Cliff Notes. All right, Tony Lee, can you hear me? Okay, Tony's works with her iPhone. That sometimes gets to be annoying for her. Okay, Kathy, are you there this morning? Kathy, can you respond?
Yes.
Would you like the
Yeah.
knowledge of all things or not?
Probably not. I like spontaneity.
All right, spontaneity. Okay, that's an interesting thing. Serge Cruz. We don't know where Serge is. Serge doesn't know where Serge is. Serge probably, oh, he's at work. All right, probably.
No, I'm here. Okay, I will.
Would you like the knowledge of all things?
Yeah. I'll take one for the team and sacrifice my psyche. And I would, yeah. I would definitely. I think I could use it to
all right, Serge,
do a little good.
Ray, and Maureen. Now I'm going to shock all of you, and I'm going to say no, but for reasons that you may find frightening, or maybe not. I don't trust myself with what I could do with some of that to do. I've got to see how I phrase this. There are certain groups in this country that I wish I could send to other places. Mars, Pluto. Good. Pluto is good. And if I had knowledge of all things, knowledge would include how to do that. And so one of the things that scares me is I understand, and this is, I guess I'm being really, really honest. I understand how people like Noriega works in Guatemala, these old males, and how Putin works. I understand that. You stomp out and get rid of people who disagree with you. And I understand that. And I keep on saying to myself, before you judge, what would you do if you had that power? And I'm not sure. I would think that I would be doing on the side that I consider right. But those people who I consider doing wrong think they're doing right. So I don't trust myself, to be very, very honest, with having that kind of knowledge. I know myself too well sometimes not always, that would not be a good thing for me. Does that make sense? I can't speak for anybody else, but for me,
Absolutely. Power corrupts, absolutely.
Yeah, and you just brought us right around back to your question earlier about what is sin. There's a connection there.
Mhm.
Danny says, Danny Sorkin raised the question, is knowing all things the same as all power? If you know everything, if you know all things, you know how to get power, and you know how to abuse power.
Yeah.
By definition, if you know all things, that means you know how to abuse power, you know how to get power, and you know how to abuse power, and you know how to deny what you're doing that's bad. Right?
Right.
Yeah, that's part of the other side of the thing that nobody likes to talk about. So we left then the story of the garden. Let's see where we end here today. Where we ended here today. All right. So out of the ground, the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life in the midst of the garden, and also the tree of the knowledge of all things. Yes. And so we begin. I want to thank Danny Sorkin again for the fabulous job he has done. He's letting me take some time with you this summer, and I want to thank Danny. He's been he is a tremendous sport for doing this. I read the work that the homework he gave everybody, and it's been absolutely brilliant. And he'll be taking over again when I depart in the fall. But what I would like to do, if this works for the rest of you, we do some Genesis in the summer, and then when you're between books, we can go back to more of Genesis. We can make this, in other words, not like kind of an ongoing thing. So as long as I don't have to record, I'm good.
It's good to me. I'm for that plan. I favor it.
So we can do both. We don't have to have A or B. We can do both. We can have, when you're between books, I can jump in for a period of time. As long as I don't have to record, I'm fine. That was killing me. And Dan does a great job. Daniel, where you come up with this stuff is incredible. The work he does. So read the thing on the documentary hypothesis I sent you. We continue with 1. Then we're going to get into a very, very interesting character who I want you to know is the serpent. The serpent, yes. And I want you, as we leave, to think of the serpent as wearing a white linen suit and speaking with a Southern accent. Thank you.
Easy to do.
Pat wants to know, is he also wearing a fedora?
No. Farnsworth Bentley is holding an umbrella over his head.
Panama hat, maybe?
No, Farnsworth Bentley has the umbrella over his head.
A string tie?
No, just a simple white.
No, he's got to have a string tie like Colonel Sanders.
Exactly.
Huey Long. Who said Huey Long? Oh, mercy. Well, just I'll leave you like this. Just think of it like this. Why, I do declare, my, oh my, who is that? Why, Miss Eve. Why, Miss Eve, how you, my, oh my, how are you, Miss Eve? On that pleasant note, I will see you next Saturday. Again, if you can remember this, if you want your own, you can get them cheaper but this HarperCollins Study Bible, New Revised Standard Version. The footnotes are well worth it. The footnotes in all of the readings, and they will give you information that most preachers and others don't want you to have. Okay, any questions in? Any questions? Thank you all. Thank you all. Let me say goodbye to Maureen and Pat, AJ, Pat in a small area of Tampa. It's a remote village in the West Coast. Nanette Bartels in Fiji, Connecticut. Franzella with her 2-year-old techie. Roy out in Washington Heights, Bellingham. Ron Iton Lee,
Sorry, Ken.
ouch.
It's Ray in Washington Heights.
Why do I look, I know that. Ray,
I'm
Ron.
going to change my name.
No, you're not. It's Ray, Roy, and Ron.
Yeah, but you keep mixing them all up.
Because I'm old. I get to do that at my age. Let's get that clear right now. I am older than dirt and I get to do that. So I will try this one more time. Ray, Roy, and Ron. Ray's in Pluto, Roy's on Saturn, and Ron is, I don't know where Ron is.
3 R's.
It's on planet Vulcan. With all the rest of the smart people.
Okay, Ray is in Washington Heights. Roy is in Bellingham, Washington. And Ron is outside of London.
He's personally in charge of the Queen's Jubilee.
Mercy. Holly Duck is in Minnesota now. John is up in Port Orange. Franzel is across the way. Amelia and Don Schweitzer are up in Ormond Beach. Tony Lee is in Miami Lakes. Serge Cruz is with us today, and Kathy is with us today, both from Miami. So we welcome you all. We will continue now, get set for the next 3 months of working this through.
For anyone who wants to continue the discussion, either message me or Roy, because sometimes we like to hang on and talk to each other after our official session is done.
Fine,
So
as you see fit. Okay.
either me or Roy, we can set up another Zoom meeting.
Okay. All righty, everybody. Take care. We see you in a week. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good weekend, and everybody.
Bye.
Let's hope Goldie doesn't get this message. Here's Goldie.
Maureen, I'll start a new one and invite you.
It looks like we're still on. I don't know.
Looks like we're still on, but start a new one anyway, just in case they sign us off here. Here's
And we
Goldie.
might still be recording.
Well, I can't until I would have to leave this meeting to do that.
Okay, let's all leave, and then whoever wants to come back, email Roy.
Or
How about
actually email
You
you.
guys,
I don't have.
Oh.
Kathy.
Yeah, Kathy.
It's me. I'm the one
Yeah,
that's
hi.
still. Hi, so I'm the one that's still here, and as soon as I cut off, then you guys will cut off.
Okay.
Okay,
So
Do you want to put in the chat where to go to so that those that want to go can go?
yeah, put in your email address, Roy.
the
So
thing
they
is,
can email you.
can they text you, Maureen? Go ahead and put your text.
Yeah, you can text me at,
Thanks, Frenzel.
while you guys are doing that,
that's my phone. You can text me at that number, and then I can send you the link.
I'm gonna leave now, and I just want to say that was my one-liner, my answer. And what it means is, I don't know. But I'm just saying bye, and I enjoyed. It was very stimulating.
As always.
Good to have you, Amalia.
Thanks. I'll see everyone, anyone I don't see. Nice to see you. See you next week. Everyone else will see you in a
Next
moment.
week.
Okay.
guys, I gotta leave. We're leaving town in a little while to my niece's baby shower in Venice. So I'm gonna cut out. I'm still packing. Okay.
Okay.
But great seeing you all. Thank you. This was fun. And thanks again, Maureen. Would you believe I was in bed when you texted me? I went to bed after 2 this morning, and I knew
Wow.
it was 10:30, and I thought, oh my God, let me get on. So anyway, but love you all. Mwah.
Love
And
you
have
all.
fun on the
Have
talk.
fun.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.